The marketplace of Urindor 7 was alive with sound and color. Alien merchants from hundreds of different species called out in melodic, grating, and sometimes almost musical tones, trying to attract customers to their stalls. Floating carts glided silently over the cobblestone paths, while mechanical drones weaved through the crowds, delivering goods from one vendor to another. Despite the chaos, one small stall drew a surprisingly steady line of visitors. The aroma of spiced vegetables, sizzling protein, and freshly baked bread floated in the air, cutting through the usual metallic scent of machinery and dust. Lyra, a young alien chef with pale blue skin and large, amber-colored eyes, worked behind the stall. Her fingers moved deftly, chopping and stirring, mixing ingredients with a care that bordered on obsession. Her tentacle-like hair shifted slightly whenever she bent over a simmering pot, and she occasionally wiped her brow with the sleeve of her apron. Cooking was her world, and in it she was confident. Here she could create, express, and shine. Outside of this, she felt small, awkward, and unsure. Her species valued eloquence above all. To speak without grace or rhythm was seen as a weakness. Lyra had tried many times to join conversations with other young aliens in her district, but her words always faltered. She stumbled over sentences, mispronounced formal greetings, and rarely understood subtle social cues. She had learned to avoid groups entirely, fearing judgment. Cooking, at least, had no need for spoken perfection. Food spoke louder than words ever could. Today, she was preparing a dish she had spent hours perfecting, a fusion of spicy Urindorian roots and tangy human fruit preserves she had somehow acquired through traders. She had no expectation that anyone would notice. This was just for practice. "You're making that again?" a familiar, smooth voice asked. Lyra flinched slightly and looked up. A human stood before her stall, casually leaning on the counter. He had dark hair, warm brown eyes, and a grin that somehow made her feel less nervous. He was tall, lanky, and looked oddly out of place among the intricate alien forms of the market, but he moved with ease as if he belonged everywhere. Yes, Lyra admitted, fidgeting with her spoon. "It tastes better than before. I'm testing it." "You make it the way you make it. That's perfect enough. You should sell this everywhere." They were simple, but they carried a weight she had never expected to feel. Lyra didn't know how to respond. Humans were strange. They didn't care about the rules her society had drilled into her. They seemed to see people as they were, not as they were expected to be. You think I'm okay?" she asked, her voice barely audible. He smiled again. "More than okay. You're unique." "That's better than perfect." Words were not her gift, but she allowed herself the small satisfaction of a nod. After he left, she stared at the empty space where he had stood, feeling a strange warmth she could not name. The rest of the day passed in a blur of chopping, stirring, and serving. Yet, even amid the usual bustle, she found herself thinking about him. He hadn't judged her for speaking poorly. He hadn't looked down on her. In fact, he had seemed to admire her. Could anyone admire her for just being herself? As the market began to quiet for the evening, Lyra cleaned her stall with meticulous care. She stacked her utensils, wiped the counters, and folded the cloth covering her ingredients. Her mind, however, wandered back to the human. She wondered what it was about him that made him different from everyone else she had met. Maybe it was that he had not tried to measure her against any rules she had been taught. Maybe that was the first time someone had seen her without filters. The next morning, Lyra woke before dawn. The sky of Urindor 7 was painted in streaks of orange and violet, reflecting off the metallic city that sprawled beyond the market district. She quickly prepared a new dish, inspired by a strange combination of spices she had never tried together. She hummed softly as she worked, losing herself in the rhythm of chopping, stirring, and blending. Today, she decided, would be different. She would let the food speak for her. When the market opened, the human was already waiting. He leaned against the edge of her stall, casually scanning the various goods around him. When he saw her, he waved, and she felt her chest tighten in a way she didn't fully understand. "You made something new?" he asked. Lyra nodded, her tentacle-like hair twitching nervously. "Yes, I hope you like it." "The food does all the talking." Each time he tried a new dish she had created, offering small suggestions or stories about his travels. Slowly, she began to understand human humor, even if she couldn't replicate it perfectly. He asked questions she didn't always understand, but he never mocked her confusion. Instead, he answered patiently, sometimes with a joke, sometimes with a quiet nod, and always with warmth. One afternoon, a group of young aliens approached her stall. They were known for their sharp tongues and sharper judgments. "Why are you letting a human talk to you like that?" one of them sneered. You're supposed to speak properly. You're an embarrassment. Better than perfect. I cook, she said finally, her voice steady though her words trembled slightly. My food speaks for me. That evening, as the twin moons of Urindor 7 rose over the metallic skyline, Lyra closed her stall. She looked at the stars, feeling a strange sense of calm and purpose. Tomorrow, she would cook again, and maybe, just maybe, she would speak a little more freely, too. For the first time, she realized that being awkward, being different, being herself, it was enough. And somewhere in the crowd, someone had already seen it. Lyra noticed the change in the market before anyone said it out loud. More ships were docking at Urindor 7, larger ones, sleeker ones. Their hulls carried symbols of distant systems and powerful guilds. Travelers spoke in excited tones, and even the usually calm drones moved faster, as if sensing importance in the air. Something big was coming. She learned what it was from Jace, the human, when he arrived later than usual one morning. His expression was bright but thoughtful, like someone holding a secret they could not wait to share. There's an announcement spreading across the stations, he said, resting his arms on her stall counter. The Grand Interstellar Culinary Trial, it's real. Not a rumor this time. I cannot, she said quickly. I do not speak well, I would fail before I begin. Confidence. Posters appeared on hollow screens, showing images of alien chefs and glowing dishes. Registration stations were set up near the spaceport. Lyra walked past them again and again, never stopping. Other vendors noticed. You should enter, said an elderly trader whose stall sold mineral spices. Your food draws lines longer than mine ever did. But at night, when she lay in her small living space above the market, she thought about it. She imagined kitchens larger than any she had seen. Ingredients from worlds she had only read about. She imagined cooking without limits, and she imagined standing silent while others spoke for her. The thought scared her. On the morning before registration closed, Lyra arrived early to the market. The air was cool and the light soft. She cooked slowly, carefully, as if each movement mattered more than usual. When Jace arrived, she didn't look up right away. I will try, she said suddenly. Jace blinked. Try what? That's all anyone can do. Specialty. Ingredients floated in containment fields. Tools adjusted themselves to different hand shapes automatically. Lyra stood at her station, frozen. Around her, other competitors moved with confidence. Some barked orders to assistants. Others spoke eloquently to recording drones, explaining their philosophy and technique. Lyra said nothing. When the signal sounded, she began. She focused on what she knew, the feel of the tools, the scent of spices, the sound of oil heating. She combined ingredients slowly at first, then faster as her confidence grew. Her hands remembered what her mind tried to forget. A nearby competitor glanced at her. Are you going to explain your process? They asked sharply. Lyra shook her head and kept cooking. The judges walked the aisles, observing. When they reached her station, one of them spoke. Chef, can you describe your dish? This tells its own story, they said quietly. Lyra exhaled, unaware she had been holding her breath. She passed the first round. The second round was harder. Teams were formed at random, mixing species and styles. Lyra was paired with two competitors who spoke rapidly and expected fast responses. She's not contributing, one of them snapped when Lyra didn't answer a question. She is, the other said reluctantly, watching Lyra adjust the seasoning without being asked. Just differently. I am not speaking, she replied. And yet, he said, everyone is listening. That night, Lyra sat alone, staring out at the stars through the station window. She felt exhausted, scared, and alive all at once. For the first time, the universe felt larger than her fears. She did not know if she would win, but she knew one thing: she belonged here. And tomorrow, she would cook again. The morning of the final round arrived with a chill that cut through the corridors of the Grand Culinary Hall. Lyra woke earlier than usual, her mind buzzing with nerves and excitement. Today would determine everything, the culmination of weeks of preparation, risk, and courage. The station's artificial sunlight shone weakly through the massive windows, painting the metallic floors with streaks of orange and silver. She dressed carefully, adjusting her apron and straightening the straps of her cooking gloves. Her tentacle-like hair shifted nervously with each small movement. Her body was tense, but her hands were steady, trained, as always, by hours of practice and the comforting rhythm of her craft. Jace met her outside her quarters, his human form relaxed as ever, though his eyes carried that spark of quiet encouragement he always offered. Big day, he said with a grin. Lyra nodded, her throat tight. Yes, big, she admitted. Words still came slowly, but they had begun to carry weight instead of shame. "You're ready," he said simply. "You just cook like you always do. Let the food speak." Some were in full ceremonial attire, their scales, feathers, or glowing skin displayed proudly. Others moved briskly, focused entirely on their stations. All eyes were on the final round. The hall itself was enormous. Hundreds of cooking stations were lined in precise rows, equipped with every tool imaginable. Ingredients from distant planets floated in zero-gravity containers. There were exotic fruits that shimmered with iridescent light, roots that glowed faintly, meats and proteins that pulsed with energy. The scents mingled into a dizzying haze that made Lyra's stomach flutter. Her assigned station was near the center, surrounded by competitors who exuded confidence. Many had assistants, mechanical arms, drones, or apprentices from their home worlds. Lyra had only her hands, her utensils, and her instincts. When the final signal sounded, she took a deep breath and began. She started slowly, measuring and mixing with deliberate care. The crowd's murmurs and the judges' wandering gazes faded from her mind. She imagined the human fruits she had tasted with Jace, the spices she had studied late at night, and the textures that would harmonize best. Each movement was precise, each ingredient added with intent. Her world became the kitchen. Nearby, a competitor with 4 arms and scales that shimmered like liquid silver glanced at her. "Are you even trying?" he asked, his voice sharp. Lyra did not answer. She simply adjusted a spice blend with a careful pinch, tasting the sauce and nodding subtly. As the competition progressed, some competitors struggled. One alien accidentally dropped a precious container, its contents floating away in the anti-gravity field. Another miscalculated a cooking time, producing a dish that was burnt in one section and undercooked in another. Judges moved swiftly, tasting and commenting quietly, but Lyra paid them no mind. Hours passed. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her muscles ached, but she pressed on. She was no longer afraid of failure. She was afraid only of not being true to herself. When the final moments approached, she arranged the dishes on the presentation platter with care. Colors, textures, and scents intertwined perfectly, creating a harmony she could feel even without speaking. Each element had been chosen not to impress with words, but to communicate with essence, aroma, and taste. A judge appeared at her station. "Chef," the voice said, neutral but curious, "explain your dish." She could fumble through words, or she could do what she had always done. She held out the platter, letting the aromas speak. The judge inhaled deeply, their eyes widening subtly. They tasted, and tasted again. The surrounding competitors murmured. Many were confident, some skeptical, but even they paused to observe her work. The flavors were bold, unfamiliar, yet comforting in a way that made them nostalgic. It was as though every ingredient had a story, every spice a memory, and together they told a tale no words could capture. After tasting, the judge nodded silently, stepping back. Lyra exhaled, her tension easing for the first time all day. When the final announcement came, the hall fell into a hush. The head judge, a tall being with translucent skin that revealed a faint pattern of flowing veins, spoke slowly, letting the words linger. "The winner of the Grand Interstellar Culinary Trial is Lyra of Urindor 7. Then from somewhere in the crowd, she heard it, cheers, claps, and whistles. She turned her gaze and saw Jace smiling, his hands raised in triumph. Lyra's heart swelled. She wanted to speak, to say something eloquent, but words felt small compared to the moment. She simply smiled, a wide, genuine smile that radiated relief and pride. The head judge continued. "This chef has proven that mastery is not always in words or ceremony, but in skill, courage, and authenticity. A dish that communicates, even in silence, is one that truly resonates." Lyra realized then that she had not only won a competition, she had earned respect not by imitating others, but by embracing her own way of expressing herself. Later, in a quieter corner of the station, Jace approached her. "You did it," he said simply. Lyra smiled, still catching her breath. I think I did. You showed them that being different is powerful, that being yourself is enough." Foods from different worlds were shared, music of countless species filled the air, and lights shimmered in colors Lyra had never seen before. She walked through the festivities with Jace by her side, tasting, observing, and for the first time, feeling fully part of something bigger than herself. A group of young alien chefs approached her. Some had laughed at her in previous rounds, some had doubted her skills. "Lyra," one said cautiously, "we underestimated you. Your food, it's incredible." "I just cooked what I felt." Planets glimmered in blues, greens, and reds. The hum of the station was a soft lull beneath the vastness of the universe. "I never imagined this," Lyra said, her voice soft but steady. "I thought my words, my awkwardness, would always hold me back. Your heart, your skill, you." Days later, Lyra returned to Urindor 7, her stall smaller but her confidence much larger. The marketplace greeted her with curiosity, admiration, and respect. Other chefs, traders, and even strangers asked her to share her techniques, not because they wanted to critique her words, but because they wanted to learn from her skill. Lyra continued to cook, but now she understood that cooking was more than sustenance. It was a language of its own, one that transcended speech, species, and culture. Through flavors, aromas, and textures, she could express herself fully, and the universe could listen. In the quiet moments, she often thought of the human who had encouraged her. She never needed to explain why his words mattered so much, or why his belief in her had been powerful enough to change her life. She simply carried it with her, a quiet strength, a reminder that connection did not always require perfect speech. One evening, as she served a freshly prepared meal to a line of customers, she glanced toward the station window. The stars shone brightly like promises waiting to be fulfilled. Jace's voice echoed in her memory, "You're perfect." And with that, she knew the universe was vast, full of challenges and wonders, but she was ready. She would face it with her hands, her heart, and her courage, one dish at a time. Her story had begun with fear and silence, but it ended with a voice of its own, a voice spoken not in words, but in the language of the soul. Lyra was no longer just an awkward young chef. She was a creator, a pioneer, a symbol of the extraordinary potential within those who dared to be themselves. And in that moment, she realized that the universe, vast and unknowable as it was, had finally recognized her.